Teen-centric.
Teen-centric.
You're listening to Teen-centric.
Teen-centric.
KPPQ, LP Ventura, 104.1 FM.
I'm your host, Craig Rosen with Teen-centric, and today in the studio I have with me Litzy. Hello, Litzy.
Hi, Craig.
I'm so glad you're here to let our listeners know. Litzy and I worked together through an organization called MyCop when she was a member of the Tequio Youth Program. She's written some amazing poems. For people who aren't really familiar with the term Indigenous, you know, they see you and they think, oh, you immigrated from Mexico, so you're Mexican. But tell people who maybe are confused by the term or don't understand why it's important for you to distinguish that.
When I say I'm Indigenous, it means, you know, having a beautiful language, having, you know, brown skin. And I don't mean like light skin, I mean like brown skin. Having la danza de los diablos. It means, you know, being attached to culture more than anything else. And I think it's important to, you know, make a difference between Mexicans and Indigenous. We have like a native language. My family speaks Mixteco. They're from San Jorge, Nochita, Oaxaca. And we just have a very different, and anyone who is Mexican would know that, you know, nobody wants to be Indigenous because it means discrimination, it means racial profiling, it means laughter when you cross by and you hear someone speak Mixteco.
Yeah, and you make a point that not only do you experience discrimination from white people, but you get it within your own community that Mexican people who are not Indigenous have you know, attitudes toward Indigenous, and you had to deal with that all through high school and such. Can you talk about that? And I know you also did some activism to try to address some of the demeaning terms that people used, and maybe let our listeners know what you did out there.
So, yeah, to address the anti-Indigenous sentiments that a lot of Mexicans
express.
Yeah, like growing up, I've always like known I was different. I've always like tried not to say that I was from Oaxaca or I spoke a native language because I knew that came with a lot of laughter. And if not laughter, it was more like, oh, you don't sound like them, you don't talk like them. How are you even one of them because you speak Spanish and you speak English? Like, how are you even smart? How are you in even AP classes if you're Mixteca or you're Indigenous, you're from Oaxaca? And so I always really avoided it. And it wasn't until I was in Tequio with MyCop that I really felt beautiful and that I felt like I truly belonged. And I don't like to use the word belong often, but like Tequio was really that space where I can just feel like, oh, everyone is actually going through the same stuff as me, and that we are feeling, you know, lost in Ventura County and in Oxnard and our high schools and a lot of our friend groups. And so I felt really welcomed in Tequio, and we launched a campaign for indigenous interpretation in Oxnard's school district, where we demanded that the school district translate documents in Spanish and Mixteco and Tagalog, and also provide interpretation at graduations, award ceremonies. Like I had a 4.7 GPA in high school. I always got awards, but my parents never really understood either because they don't fully speak Spanish. For them to see their daughter be number one but not really understand that, it was necessary. And I think that it was the first step for Indigenous families to get involved in education.
One of the things that just blows my mind is to hear that there was really a time in your life here in this county where you didn't want to self-identify and that you felt scared about it or self-conscious about it, because the Litzy that I've known is so strong and outspoken, and you've spoken in front of people in groups, and like you said, you've received awards, and listeners may not be aware, but she is currently enrolled at University of California, Berkeley. I mean, this is no small thing, man. But the fact that you felt that way just means that, like, my God, for people who don't have as many inner core strengths that you have, or you've had a lot of people in the community who have helped you, and for people that don't have that, the hurdles just must be so huge. How about reading a poem that you wrote for us? I really look forward to that.
Okay, a little backstory to this poem. So when I first immigrated to the country, I was a year old. So that has really affected me in the way that I have forcibly disconnected from my culture and home. And for me, home is, my grandma and people that I love and people that I should be with. And so I write a lot about my grandmother, and I write a lot about home, even though oftentimes I don't really know what that means. I've never met my grandma. I really don't talk to her because she speaks Mixteco and I am not fluent in Mixteco. And so, yeah, I write to them to put it out into the universe that I miss them and that I long for them, and that it's not my fault that, these things happen to us. Nana, mi abuelita querida, oh how I love and yearn for you. Absent for my 17th birthday, do you still remember your granddaughter? 2 centuries, 2 worlds, but 1 relationship. From 5,176 miles away, do I still matter to you? The same way I mattered when life took me unwillingly from your motherly touch. I ask God, why do I call another woman my grandmother? I assure you, grandmother, every time I blow out my candles, I wish for you to be by my side. In that long traditional dress, which defines both of our struggles. I would implore you to come here, but that would be selfish. I cry when I see your picture, though you're still alive. There is an emptiness by my side every time I blow out my candles. You weren't there when I took my first steps. You weren't there when I said mom. You weren't there when I graduated high school, but Nana, you were there when my mom gave birth in a dark place. With my dad out here when I came into this world. Stop feeding and hiding your pain. I am scared I will only see you on your deathbed because I will be in another country chasing my dreams and yours. I hope you understand that I love you. Unije Ehovita. That's my grandmother.
Thank you. That was great. One of the things I wanted to get into talking to you is that I think it's really hard for a lot of people to ask for help, but everybody needs help, and help takes so many different forms. And then the truth of the matter is when a person has an opportunity to give assistance to somebody, it's one of the most rewarding things possible. I mean, I feel privileged myself to know you, to know other members of the community, and to have had a little chance to do some things like when I helped you with your college essay. But so
Thank you.
How would you, of course, thank you. How would you talk to people who are just so terrified of asking for help and thinking that's a worse stigmatization when in fact in your world, it's really made a difference?
Oh God. I think, yes, a lot of Indigenous, Mixteco and Zapoteca individuals are really scared to ask for help, especially from white people. And I think I've gotten a lot of financial and, emotional support from mentorship and just love from everyone, and including white allies. And so I think for me, asking for help and people lending me a hand was essential for survival. A lot of people at UC Berkeley, a lot of low-income people face food insecurity, homelessness, and that's not what they tell you. They don't tell you these things when you're admitted into UC Berkeley. They tell you, wow, you were an exception, you are a star because you made it to UC Berkeley. But what they don't tell you is that they won't support you in those ways, mentally, physically, emotionally. And so what does it mean for you to understand that you need this help? I know it's hard, and I know it's embarrassing to help for help, but I think if you want to survive, and any of these people truly want to help you, I think that you need it. And take whatever you need. If people are willing to help, just ask, and if they say no, well, like, go on to the next person. Just put it out into the universe that you need help.
Good for you for saying that. I really believe that too. And as a white ally of yours, I will say that, it's been something that's been like a gift in my life to be able to assist somebody like you. There are a lot of issues that teens face, but I'm wondering if your particular circumstances as a person who's immigrated here and who, as you say, forcibly removed from your culture, feeling a disconnect to it, the whole issue of not even having, full comprehension of your own language, it must just outweigh so many of the other massive things that teens have to deal with when we start talking about social media bullying and just other things that are going on. Is that true? Is that still like that's most front and center in your life? Or what are the biggest issues that you struggle with?
So something that really affected my youth in general were several things that, happened because and have affected because of, my undocumented status and, being a woman. And so often I feel like I have not really felt what it means to be a child. And I don't blame anyone. I don't blame my family. It's just the tough circumstances that I have been put into. So when I was younger, I've always had to care for my younger siblings as the only woman in my family. I had to care for them. I had to feed them. I always felt, and to this day, I do feel this strong sense of obligation to my family. When that was one of the most difficult things when I went to college, feeling like I have an obligation to my family, that I should feel guilty because I'm not with my family and I'm not taking care of my siblings, and I cannot help my mom and I cannot help my dad. And so and that was a learned thing throughout my teen years. And so whenever I would go to Tequio, before I would go to Tequio, I would have to pick up my siblings. I would have to feed them. I would have to wait for my parents to get home and then take the bus and then go to Tequio. And so it was something that, a lot of teens do not have to face. And, maybe some teens will, feel the same way, that they have this strong obligation as a woman, as a first generation, always feeling obligated to your family. Even I have a partner right now, and I still feel like this obligation to be physically with my family. So that was one thing. And I don't blame anyone. My parents are farm workers, and they had their troubles and they had their problems, so it's just life. And then I've talked about being sexually assaulted when I was 13 years old or 12 years old. And so what that means for immigrant, youth, women who are put into a difficult place because of their status, because of their illegality. And so when I talk about, my childhood and my teen years, recently when I was with my, now I'm seeing a therapist because, all of us need therapy and all of us need to talk to someone about these things, a professional. And so I finally got to reflect on all of that. And I'm okay with it. I'm okay because I'd come to terms that it's not anyone's fault. It's just, circumstances that because of your several identities that may be oppressive that you have to face. So yes, that's what what a teen means to me. And now as an older sibling, I try to pamper my siblings, try to give them love while my parents aren't home, even though I'm here with you. But when I am with them, I try to raise them in a different way, with more love and understanding and empathy. And just
You're listening to CENTRIC. This is KPPQ LP Ventura 104.1 FM.
People have no idea in general how hard working in the fields is, and you've even worked in the fields yourself, right? And then when you first came here, didn't you say that you had to sleep in the fields when you first arrived? So like your life story has struggles that most people will never in their wildest, dreams have to deal with. And here you are, just a really remarkable person who's just enduring things and trying to make it better for your community. And we were talking in the car on the way over about how as you make a choice to attend an established university and to pursue advanced degrees, and that there can be members of your community that don't agree with that choice, or that they're uncomfortable with that choice, whether it's a version of selling out in their mind or just sort of assimilating in a way that they don't relate to or respect, and that's something you also have to deal with yourself. And talk about your activism, if you will, and just how you navigate that balance between making these inroads in higher education and still wanting to absolutely represent your Indigenous brothers and sisters.
Well, yes, I have always talked about how, as someone who is attending, the number one public university in this country, I don't blame people for seeing me like that. I don't blame them. And so what I tried to do, and I explained in the car, that, I'm trying to be very intentional in the ways that I, give into this institution, and in what ways I can really do activism. Right now I'm pursuing research with the program called Fireball Scholars, Marco Antonio, and just going back and forth between my COP and always grounding myself, and that has been really essential for me, grounding all of my work with community. So in what ways am I really listening to the undocumented community out in the Bay? In what way am I being intentional about including all 11 million or all undocumented people, and not just students, and not just a narrative that gives something legal relief to the exception? And so that, like, for me right now, working with actual community members, and ask them, what do you think would be justice for you? Because I can write in this fancy language, and I can flourish, and I can do all of this, but if it doesn't make sense to my community, then who am I really writing this for? And I just always want to really, I know my community has a voice. I am not saying that they don't. And so how can I really uplift those voices, rather than, say that they don't have a voice, but, just, here's the research. What do you want to do with it? What do you want to be said?
You really prioritized in those teen years in high school here, making sure you could be part of Techio and getting to MyCop. And can you also say a few words about that organization, and speaking to people who might either be unaware, or if they've heard of it but haven't, sort of taken steps to say, I could join and do these things, about why they might want to?
So MyCop is the Mixteco Indigenous Community Organizing Project, and one little program of MyCop is the Techio Youth Group, which literally means community and, giving back to the community. If you are a person who identifies as Indigenous, and Indigenous can mean a lot of things. If you are, Indigenous to the land in which we call the United States now, or Mexico, or, Peru, Central America. And for those who do not identify as Indigenous and want to help MyCop, there's a lot of community events that MyCop does, in which you can be an ally, and you can, give your volunteer time to them.
I opened the chapbook called Techio to one of your pieces. Would you be willing to read that?
Yes.
I will be change. I will encourage others around me to be changed, and things will change. I'm here to tell you my story, but there's also 11 million other undocumented humans suffering from the same dream. Yo estoy aquí para contarte mi vida, pero aún hay 11 millones de humanos indocumentados, lo cual también están sufriendo por un sueño. Yo oye nakane historia shi vide hutai I ushu I millón na ko tutu shi hikana kaha sufrir na ni sueño shina.
I am from San Jorge, Nuchita, Oaxaca, Mexico.
an impoverished state with mouth-watering food made of rich anjonjoli, ajo, chile cascabel, and chile de árbol. I am from rhythmic and lyrical tumdabi that makes your jaw drop. I am from brown-skinned humans with beautiful features, powerful jawlines, rigid noses, and the softest black eyes. I am from parents who gave it all up in hopes of a better life, in the land of the free, food on the table every day, a bed on a frame, and not the rock-hard dirt, never having to beg for diaper money. My parents hoped for this better life, but I long for the one that I had. How does someone become foreign in a nation built by immigrants? How can people who pick the food that feeds this nation put children to sleep with empty stomachs? How can I have lived here most of my life, a class valedictorian with a 4.7 GPA, and not qualified for financial aid? I came to a place where oppression is a norm, where my parents cannot own a home, where I am trapped between two worlds, supporting my family now or seeing them suffer as I reach for my future. I'm tired of living in a place where an indigent number defines you, where money prevails heritage, where a white person has greater value than a native. I'm tired of seeing my parents scared, stressed, and hopeless. I'm tired of the special treatment given to others. Equality is a fairy tale. Why is it so hard to accept my color, my indigenous roots? I want to live in a world where the melanin of your skin is cherished, accepted, and loved, where the government makes room for an individual instead of maintaining a status quo. I want to live in a world where my loved ones do not have to beg for a better life, but get to live it. I want to break free from the sorrow, pain, and broken backs inside La Jaula de Oro, this golden cage called the American dream.
Wow. Very strong piece. You were talking before about how you've been seeing a therapist to try to help you through a lot of what you've had to deal with and still have to deal with. That's another area where I think there are many young people, especially I think from the immigrant community, some of the indigenous communities, and even Spanish-speaking communities that second generation born here, still see as a uncomfortable reality, one they don't want to, maybe a road they don't want to go down, stigma issues or these sorts of things. And we're getting to a time right now in our society where mental health issues are getting a lot more attention. And how would you talk about the experience and encourage people who may need that kind of help to also be willing to seek it out without having to feel ashamed?
When I first sought out therapy, it was like my first year. I didn't really think that it would help me because, you know, who would really understand my experience holistically, who would analyze me holistically and really not, you know, chastise me, like really understand me. And I feel like when I speak to people, I don't know, like it's just not the advice that I really need. I just really need to be understood, and you know, that's something that I really struggled throughout my whole life. And not like, you know, skipping parts of what I'm feeling, which is something that I've learned to do, you know, just keep some things for you and you know, be vulnerable at times, but, you know, most of your vulnerability, keep it inside. And one thing that I really stood out to me when I went to therapy was that I've learned to... how do I describe this? I learned to, you know, just ignore my emotions and just go on. And because I ignore these emotions, I just break sometimes. And I just cry and I cry and I cry. And I did not want that. I did not want to feel so devastated and so broken at one point and feeling like the whole world was like just ending for me. And that's why I just like learned to, like, you know, sit with my emotions, write them down. How am I feeling? How communicate with people my boundaries, to feel healthy and to feel happy and to feel truly loved. And this is a process, you know. I'm only 19, and I think it's essential for people to go to therapy for several reasons, and specifically the American and Indigenous communities. I know people say, and I've heard it myself, you know, coming from that community, that if you go, you're crazy. And how come in Oaxaca we don't have therapists, and how come like here we need therapists? And there's a lot of forms of therapy that, doesn't really look like therapy in Oaxaca, but there is. And I feel like, rephrasing it for our parents in that way, like have someone to talk to, and just like, for my parents, I know now I have gotten to the point where I can be like, hey, you need to seek therapy for these reasons. And, not coming from a place and telling people, you need therapy because you're broken and you need help and all these things. But, you just need to be heard sometimes, and you need people to understand you. And you just need to let it all out. And so that's something that, my mom has dealt with depression, and she didn't even know she was dealing with depression her whole life. And my dad has been dealing with anxiety for a long time. And now I'm diagnosed with PTSD. And so, coming to them and telling them like, look, I have these things, but they're not all I am, and that's something that, I pressure a lot of people to do, and I advise a lot of people to do, because we deserve to feel happy. And I think that when a lot of bad stuff happens to us, we just get drowned in all these emotions. And, like as people, as people of color, as Indigenous people, as undocumented people, like we deserve to be happy. And we deserve to feel liberated in ways, in a way that means to be heard. And, it's hard to find a therapist who will really like do that for us, and not like say you're parenting wrong and you're doing all of this wrong. But, you're a person, and I see you and I hear you, and I'm sorry that you had to go through these things. But you deserve happiness too. And so that's my advice.
You're so right. And I would think that maybe one of the holdbacks, in addition to, like you said, the notion of that makes me crazy, or, the stigma stuff, that finding somebody who speaks the language, finding somebody with maybe some connection to your community. They don't have to necessarily be Indigenous, but that's difficult. Why don't you talk for a little bit about what your plans are for the future? Because I think that the future looks bright for you.
I know I want to, keep on working with Oxnard and the Indigenous community here in Ventura County. I am pursuing law school after my undergrad, and, doing immigration law, because I know that there is a real need for Indigenous people to be really understood in their native tongue, and to not feel like they have to explain what it means to be Indigenous and undocumented. So that's basically.
That's great. I like that pathway that you're charting for yourself, and I know that there are times where there's uncertainties or there's pushback from different sides of the world, but I would just say to you, the best of luck, and way to go, because I know that you're a really caring and committed person, and you've done some remarkable things already. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you for giving me the platform to speak and to, share my truth.
Let's do it again.
For sure.
My guest today had it rough coming here as a young child, being pulled away from her homeland, facing discrimination and poverty, difficulties assimilating, and here she is at UC Berkeley, wanting to help others in her situation, wanting to make a difference, wanting to work for constructive change. You may disagree with certain policies around immigration in this country, but there is no need to denigrate immigrants. Every white person living in this country, their family ultimately, go back far enough, came here from somewhere else. Indigenous people need to be recognized for who they are, where they come from, the fact that many of them were here before any of us. The music you heard today, behind the poem Abuelita, the first she recited, was written and performed by Juan D. Mendoza in Ventura, and behind the poem Change, the music was written, composed, and recorded by Nick Salcedo, owner and operator of Wild Boar Recording Studios in Camarillo. CENTRIC is a partnership of the Ventura County Arts Council, CAPS Radio. We receive support from the California Arts Council's Jumpstarts program, and our poetry books are published with help from the Ventura County Office of Education. If you're interested in learning more about the Indigenous community here in Ventura County, I encourage you to look up the nonprofit organization MICOP. You can find them at www.mixteco.org. It's MIXTECO.org. You can hear CENTRIC Mondays at 11:30 a.m., Thursdays at 1:30 p.m., and Fridays at 9 a.m. Thanks for tuning in. This program does not necessarily represent the opinions of KPPQ.